You may be seated. I don't know if any of you recall when you were young parents, if maybe you still are young parents, but the phrase that I often heard when I was a younger parent from my very young child was, "But you promised." I don't know if any of you ever heard that. It was some indication that you had said you would do something that, because of the complexity of life, made it impossible to fulfill that promise. And so usually the phrase that follows, "but you promised," in response to that was the parent who would say, "I know I did, but.
That's it.
Right? And that's an indication that while we desperately want to never let our children down, we in fact know that there will come circumstances in our lives that create a circumstance in which it's not possible. The number of games that parents are supposed to attend but are unable to, recitals and shows that kids are in, the variety of presents that were promised and were unable to be delivered is manifold in our lives. And then what we end up doing is we sometimes say, "But I'll make it up to you." Or sometimes we say, "I know I let you down and I'm very sorry about it." In the next few days, we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time here in Shul thinking about the promises we made that we were unable to keep, the sins that we committed, and verbalizing the fact that we're not going to do them again. So there are promises we made but were unfulfilled, and then there are promises we make in the hopes of being able to accomplish them in the coming year. To which I say to you one simple piece of advice. And while it's simple, it's still incredibly difficult to achieve. And that is, mean what you say and say what you mean. As you look through the Machzor in the next few days and you begin to say the words of our tradition, if you don't understand them in their original, then I encourage you to read the English. And then ask yourself the question, can I truly say this? Does this really resonate with me? Is this something I can accomplish? Is it something that I want to do? And then I say to you, make a choice. Say it and mean it, or don't say it. There will come moments in the prayer book in which you will come across ideas, values, inspirational words, and you'll say that inspires me to do better in the coming year. And so I promise at this moment to do it. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to achieve it. But at least make a commitment to those things you can do. Don't create for yourself lofty ambitions for the coming year. Create for yourself micro ambitions. Small goals that you can achieve and build on them. Because a promise is a promise. And you shouldn't come at the new year, next year, and say, "I tried, but I was unsuccessful." It's going to happen, I know. But we don't want to hear God saying to us, "But you promised." This week's parsha, it says, "Leman hekim otcha hayom lo la'am v'hu yelecha l'Elohim ka'asher diber lach v'chasher nishbal avotecha l'Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov." In this morning's parsha, we say that God established a covenant with us and then followed through on God's covenant. Leman hekim otcha. Right? That God followed through on the covenant. And it was hard to do because we are a stubborn and stiff-necked and straying people. But God continued to recall back to the moments of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said, "I established a covenant with you, and regardless of how far your ancestors, your descendants, thank you, No matter how far your descendants stray, I'm going to continue to uphold my end of the covenant. No excuses. Nothing got in the way. Leman hekimotecha, you have to be able to say to yourself in the coming year, I did my part. And it's Rashi who raises a great comment on this. Rashi says, Kol kach hu nichnas litroach. It's so hard to follow through on your promises. Kol kach hu litroach. It's such an imposition to do what you say you're going to do. It's just difficult sometimes. To which Rashi says, too bad. Life is hard, but you made a promise, and you have to keep your word. To which Rashi recognizes the challenge in all of us, and that is, I just said it. I didn't really mean it. You can't really hold me to it, because it was just words that I said. I didn't write it down anywhere. I didn't commit it to paper with witnesses. I just thought it, and it came out, but I didn't mean it. Don't hold me to it. It's too difficult. To which I say to you this morning, Rashi's giving you one little piece of encouragement. Guess what? Life is hard. And fulfilling what you say you're going to do is hard. But that doesn't mean you get off the hook. Look, we're going to have an interesting thing that happens in Israel in the next few months. We have two people who rightfully can form a government. They're best going to be able to form a government with each other. It's the best scenario for all the people of Israel. For these two parties that gain the most votes, who represent the most people in Israel, to come together. But it's going to be hard because they made promises to their constituents. And then sometimes those promises conflict with each other. So they're left with the challenge. But I say to you this morning, guess what? Democracy's messy. Not like tyranny or dictatorship. Democracy is messy because people's opinions matter. Because promises should be kept. And no matter how difficult it is to keep your promise, that's your word. So I say to you this morning, life is messy. Life is complicated. Things get in the way. Life happens. But if you make a promise, keep to it. But before you make your promise, make sure you're committed to it. That will keep you straight for the coming year. So as I say to you this morning, just before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, in which we will absolve ourselves of promises at Kol Nidre. We'll say, I tried, but I couldn't do it. Next year, arrive at that moment and say to yourself, how many promises did I make that I kept? How many things did I do that I followed through on because I promised to? How many times will you have to have said in the coming year, I promised, but I couldn't do it? So I say to you in the most cliche way possible, mean what you say and say what you mean. And make those difficult choices so you never have to let people down. Shabbat Shalom.